Hello, friends. Today I want to talk about a difficult but sometimes under-discussed phase of the creative life. There's a lot of stuff out there for beginners, and there's also, when you become a professional, then you're kind of like in the club a little bit, like you're a professional, you belong in professional spaces. But there's this really difficult period in the middle when you've gotten past the beginner stage, and to a certain extent, you're good. You have some talent. You know that your book is close to getting ready to submit to agents or to indie publish, whatever path you're taking. You can just taste it. Or you have been published and you're starting to have a little bit of success, but you still don't really feel like you're in that professionals club. Like you have one book out, it did okay. Even though we've talked before on this channel how the 10,000 hours thing is a little bit of a myth, but to use it as an easy metaphor, if you think about getting to 10,000 hours to master something, how do you feel when you're at about 8,000 hours? It's a stressful point because boy, you put in a lot of work, but there's still kind of a lot to go. You have to get past that hump. And I also feel like I can break down this stage into two different phases. The pre-published and the published, but both are kind of past beginner, not yet professional. And how do you survive this? So that's what we're going to talk about today. If you're new here, my name is Lydia Foxglove and I'm a fantasy author. I've been making my living as a writer since 2009. Although what I'm going to talk about is based on my experience as a writer. It could probably apply to any kind of creative endeavor or really anything that you have to put in a lot of hours to become good at. And hopefully I can be coherent in this video because PMS is absolutely slaughtering my ability to think today. But we're going to try our best to think. So when you're a beginner, you're a beginner. Everything is kind of new. You might have this mixture of total lack of confidence, just knowing you're not very good. It's hard to put yourself out there because you're like the worst person in your critique group, or you're just a beginner. That's a scary thing in and of itself. Some people also approach the beginner phase with an unwarranted level of confidence. We've all known that one person who was like, well, I'm going to write a fantasy novel because I think all the other fantasy novels are bad and I'm going to write the best one ever. But more often it's very nerve-wracking time to be a beginner. But you put in many hours. You've written a lot. You've written a lot and you've gotten to a point where you feel like, yeah, I can taste it. I'm starting to get the hang of this. I've finished manuscripts. Maybe you've started to test the waters with some kind of publishing. It could be you've queried some agents, you've submitted some short stories, you've been published in some kind of smaller fashion. You're kind of starting to feel like you're past the beginner phase. You put in a lot of time. People compliment your writing a lot, and you can, not only do they compliment it, but you can feel that they're not just bullshitting you. When you put those words down, you feel like, yeah, this is good. This is good. Not everything I do is good, but when I nail it, I am getting it. That's when you're at this point where you're starting to become ready to be a real author. And especially with indie publishing, a lot of people choose indie publishing now, so you have to decide for yourself when you're at that level of I'm ready, which can be intimidating to figure out on your own. But it's also a very scary time because you are still just coming out of the more beginner stage. So you still have a lot of nerves about it. And some of the things that can happen at this time that can knock you on your ass for a little while. You might be starting to get higher caliber level of critiques. You might be finding better critique partners, or you may pay for a real editor for the first time in your life. You might just be starting to make other author friends that are just at a higher level. Either way, you might be starting to get tougher critique. It also could be that sometimes people are now giving you tougher critiques because you're better. I mean, when I'm giving critiques and editorial notes and stuff, when somebody is obviously at a very beginner stage, I'm going to mainly focus on those really beginner mistakes, because like you don't need every kind of critique, every level from beginning to advanced all at once. No one can process that much. So if I'm working with a beginning author, I'm going to give them like a beginning kind of critique. But if I am dealing with a manuscript where the person clearly kind of knows what they're doing, I'm going to give them tougher critiques because like they can handle it, kind of. If you're in this position, you might be starting to like, you got through all the beginner critiques and now you're getting this whole new level of critique, which can really suck. Because it kind of leads to you feeling like no matter how much you learn, you're always getting knocked back to feeling like a beginner again. Somebody's always pointing out something that's like, they're right, I did that. You're still probably learning things very quickly. When I was at this stage, when I really started to focus on my work in a serious way, I was leveling up so quickly. It's like every time I would edit a manuscript, like do a big rewrite, it's like as soon as I was done with it, I would have a new idea of what I wanted to do with it. Like I could just keep rewriting it. I don't really feel that way as much now because I'm not learning things in such a big, like I'm not learning story structure in such a major way anymore, like when I was in my 20s. But at that point, it felt like no matter how much work I put in, as soon as I was done, I saw a bunch more flaws and I could keep working at it, picking at it. I just kept feeling like it's not quite right. And this can be maddening because it feels like you'll never get out of this phase. It feels like you'll never gain confidence to just write the book, edit the book, and then go, okay, that's what I wanted to say. It feels done. But eventually, this does get better because eventually your skill set becomes a little more stabilized. Another thing that is difficult at this stage is that you just get exhausted. I feel like I never put in so much brain work in my life as when I was first really trying to get published and really trying to finish and edit manuscripts. I was just packing my head with so much. I was growing so quickly as a writer. But because I was taking on so much brain work all at once, I didn't take enough time to just step back and appreciate how much better I was getting and how much I was learning and accomplishing. I was just driving myself so hard all the time, and it often felt like I really had the sense that the success was within reach. I could taste it. If I could just put enough work in, I would be there. I would have the manuscript that would get me an agent. Indie publishing was not an option at this point. But at the time, I just felt like if I can just get to this, like I can see it, if I can just reach it, I'll be able to send it out. I'll get an agent. But I would keep pushing myself through that phase. I would finish the manuscript and the edits. I would query agents. I would feel so confident. And then I would get a bunch of rejections and realize within 6 months that, nope, that wasn't it. Actually, I can see a bunch of problems with this. The cycle would repeat anew. Everything I had learned, I would feel like I needed to reapply to this book, rewrite it, make it better. I started working on other books. Everything was still very much a struggle and very hard work and very exhausting. But I also, because I could sense that I was getting closer to success, I did not let up. And sometimes I got too caught up in the moment I was in. Now, even though you are growing so quickly at this phase, another thing that can happen is that you become a little paralyzed. Making the leap becomes very scary. There's this temptation to just keep tinkering with the book. And then once you let it go, the stakes feel so high. It's like, this is the book. Like, this is my only child, and I let it out into the world, and this is my only shot. So every rejection is so painful. But looking back on this now, I realize, oh, there were so many books to come. The first book is just like nothing in the scheme of things. But it felt so monumental, and it was so scary to let it out there. And then it would get rejected, and I would go through the same process again of rewriting it and like being like, okay, I'm going to try it again. Is this it? Now, if you're choosing indie publishing, in some ways it's even more difficult because you have to be the one to choose when you're ready. And that is a hard thing to know. We're not very good judges of our own abilities, but it can also be hard to find the right kind of trusted input to really know if you're ready. If you can afford an editor, you can hire an editor, but that's no guarantee. I made a whole video about how there are a fair amount of problems with hiring an editor. They're not all good. They don't all mesh with you. So that's not like a magic bullet. I feel like the time to let a book out into the world is kind of a combination of when you just feel like it's time, like you put a lot of work in, and like you put a lot of work in, you could start to get the feeling that you're stuck in place until you let this book out into the world. And you might end up letting it out before it's ready. But because there's no way to truly know, sometimes you just have to let it out and see how it does. And in indie publishing, you can rewrite it. You can pull it and rework it. Like if it turns out that you screwed up, you're not getting good reviews, all that is fixable. It's not like in traditional publishing where it's this big, like, this is your debut. In indie publishing, it really does not matter. You can keep going, and you can also go back and fix older work. So there's a point where just, if you feel like you're stuck, if you're afraid to release the book, despite putting a lot of work into it, sometimes it's like, just try it. You might get some bad reviews. You probably will. In fact, in a lot of ways, even though they suck, you kind of want them because it does show that it's getting out there, and bad reviews are better than no reviews. If you're only getting kind of middling reviews, then at least they might give you some indication of where you could fix things. This isn't to say that you should always listen to reviews. I have gotten bad reviews my whole career. At first, I tried to listen to them. Then I realized it's better to just lean into the people who like me, give them more of what they wanted, rather than trying to change my work to appease people who gave me bad reviews. But at any rate, at some point, you just got to let it go and just start becoming the thing you want to be. Even if it turns out that after 5 years have gone by, you might look back on the first efforts and go, oh God, what was I doing? That wasn't really that great. But sometimes the only way to learn is just to start. Plus, there's a lot of like process involved in actually the publishing and the marketing, and you'll kind of learn things by doing that, even about writing. I've learned quite a lot about writing just from trying to market. But also, if you're pursuing the traditional publishing route, same thing with looking for an agent. The chances are pretty good that the first book you send out is not going to be it, and it's going to get a lot of rejections. The first book that I queried, it went nowhere. It got like one nice rejection letter, which wasn't even that involved, but it did at least give me a little bit of hope in those early days. But generally, it just completely failed. And the book that ended up being my debut novel was my second book that I queried, but I ended up completely rewriting it and querying it in like 3 separate chunks. There was like version 1, there was then a rewrite that I sent to different agents, and then there was the third version. It took me like 3 years to get from version 1 to version 3, and it was barely even recognizable from the first version. So in a lot of ways, this was almost like 2 or 3 different books. So sometimes you just got to send it out there. And what worked for me when I queried agents, the agent that became my literary agent for some years was new to agenting, and we were a great fit. So my early queries, they just didn't have the right person to go to. There's always new agents coming along, so you just should try. See what happens, because you can always send that agent a different book, or there might be a new agent in a couple years that's going to be the perfect agent for you. But either way, this is a very exhausting phase of a creative's life. If you're in this right now, hang in there, work as hard as you can, but at some point you've got to let it go. You probably will be capable of doing a better job with it in another year or 2 or 5, but there's something about the process of just letting it go and starting to try that kind of helps to further accelerate your abilities, I think. So at some point, you got to just try. Then you may start to enter the ranks of the baby professional which is very exciting at first. When I sold my first book, obviously this was a real highlight of my life. It was a lifelong dream come true. It was so surreal. It was so celebratory. I quit my job, which didn't pay a lot, so it did not take much for me to think I'm going to quit my job. And it was the start of a whole new life for me. But what it did not do was just throw open the doors to the world of career authors, published authors for life. It was only the beginning of a very rocky, bumpy journey. Now, if you're at a stage in your career where you are starting to enter a more professional phase, but you're still uncertain about a lot of things, this is the perfect time to think about attending InkersCon 2026. I am really excited to partner with InkersCon again this year because I truly believe that if you are at that point, you're going to be really happy you went to InkersCon. I've attended several author conferences throughout my life, and I always come away from them with my head crammed full of information and inspiration. But if I'm being perfectly honest, I think InkersCon is the best conference that I've ever attended. For one thing, it's really packed. You get 24 classes on writing, marketing, advertising, and business, plus dozens of roundtable discussions and author Q&As. It runs from May 30th to June 12th. Best of all, I have a $50 off coupon code for you guys. Use the code COZYCreative26 at checkout. You can find the link in the description, and you will get all of this information for $199. And if you went last year, let me know how that was for you. So you get to the point where you are now a published author. You've uploaded your first book to Amazon's KDP and or the wide publishing platforms, or you've gotten an agent, you've gotten a book deal. Either way, you're a published author. But when I sold my first book, I entered one of the most awkward, stressful periods of my entire life. For one thing, nobody prepared me for the fact that after you publish your first book, there's this huge letdown feeling. Whenever you achieve a massive dream and, that happened, it's like this huge crash will hit you. Whenever I watch the Olympics now, I always feel kind of sorry for everyone getting their medals because I feel like they all go home and are just like, ugh, like it's rough. Getting a book published traditionally is so difficult. It is such a journey to get there. And you make it. You've beaten out so many people trying to get their books published. But most of the time, your debut novel doesn't really sell that well, and it's only one book, and you go from this huge high to just realizing that kind of meant nothing. I'm a nobody. Now I got to do it all over again. And now I have a record, a sales record following me around. And if you're in indie publishing, well, that's a whole other thing. Your book might come out, you're really excited, it releases, you sell 10 copies on release day, and then you hit the second day and you get crickets because the 10 copies only sold to your family and friends. Or maybe you are kind of selling, but it just still feels kind of small, kind of not like real publishing. Or maybe it blows up. You do great, but that has its own set of stressors. Or you might have hit it big with a book that you just kind of wrote on a silly whim, you were just watching the market and you're like, oh, I could write a book like that. It wasn't your dream novel. There's so many different scenarios that can occur here. I can't cover them all, but whether you're traditionally or indie published, whether you're successful or not, publishing your first book in any fashion can be very emotionally difficult. And when my first book sold, I was friends with a lot of other writers. That was my whole social circle, was other writers. And I was also lonely. I wanted to be part of the club, I wanted to be able to hang out with other writers and be a part of the scene. Not even to be rich and famous, but just be enough a part of the scene that I could go to some events, I could hang out with authors, I could feel like I belonged there. And it was very difficult emotionally because there's a hierarchy kind of, and not even part of it's the way cliques kind of can arrange themselves, but also part of it is just, one person gets a huge book deal, one person gets a small book deal, one person gets a second book deal, the other person doesn't. One person gets invited to all the trade fairs and book tour events, conferences, the other person doesn't. But I did get the feeling that networking was important. So I tried to attend as many things as I possibly could, especially because I wanted to soak this in. I had worked so hard for this moment and I wanted to soak it all up. So I went to all the book events that I could possibly attend. I flew on more planes than I ever had before or since, right around the time of my book debut. And I was really broke. I went to Book Expo America and I was so broke. I just carried a sleeping bag around with me. And I had a couple of friends who said that I could just park my sleeping bag on the floor of their hotel room. So I ended up sleeping there for one night. I had a horrific backache. I kind of just bummed hotel rooms from 3 different people, 3 different nights. It was very mid-20s adventure. But this isn't about my adventuring. This is more about the feeling I had being a debut author and just realizing how tiny I was in the pool of authors and feeling very, very small and actually more lacking in confidence than when I was trying to get published. This debut novel I had worked so hard on and dreamed of for so long became reduced to such a drop in the ocean. And I realized no one knows who I am. No one cares about me. My accomplishments are meaningless. I mean, not really, but it does kind of feel like that. Once you kind of enter the publishing world, you realize there are a lot of books out there and you start to wonder, is my book really in any way a standout? Is it really anything great? Is anyone going to remember it in 5 years? Is it going to stay in print? Am I ever going to get a piece of fan mail? Am I ever going to sell another book? There's a lot of stuff that starts swirling around in your head. And in a lot of ways, this depression is just the most difficult time I've ever experienced. Achieving such a huge dream and realizing how incredibly just tiny it was. So I had to find some peace with that. One reason I really focus on the emotional side of the creative life is that I really had to grapple with the emotional side of the creative life as my first several books came out, because with each book, I gained a little more confidence that I really was a writer. I was starting to be a writer with multiple books out, but at the same time, I did not have a hit during my traditional publishing career. I really wanted to write the Hidden Lands books, which no one seemed to want. And I was just struggling emotionally with the fact that some of my friends were doing really well. Most of us were not. Most of us were just mid-listers. And just seeing my book on the shelf and continuing to process how small that felt. Grappling with the fact that I didn't just want a published book. I didn't just want to be a writer. I wanted to be the kind of writer people remember for their whole lives, the kind of writer that has a real impact on people. And I started to sense that these books were not that. They were not doing that by and large. And I could just feel that about them. I just knew they weren't that great. They were good enough to be published, but they were not great. And in a lot of ways, I don't know if I'm ever going to feel great in the big scheme of things. I think it's hard as an individual to reach that point where you feel like you have achieved greatness. And maybe we don't want to. Maybe you always want to feel like you're striving for more. But the thing about my early books is that I knew that they weren't great. They didn't feel like they were my version of great. I didn't feel like I would really be my own fan. I think I would like my own books, but I didn't feel like I would be a diehard fan of myself. Ultimately, this led me to where I am now, publishing the Hidden Lands world books, because that was the world that it was big, it was rich, the characters feel alive. And it really wasn't until I got to the point of starting to publish the Hidden Lands books that I really settled into myself as a writer, because I finally felt like I was publishing the kind of thing where I would be a huge fan of myself. I don't know if I feel great in the scheme of the world, but I do feel like I'm great as myself. And that makes the externals matter less. I mean, it's nice to make a living, but ultimately what matters is that I feel like the work I'm producing is great for me. But even if I had started my career writing the Hidden Lands books, the early versions of those, they were not great either. It just took time. It just took continuing to work and get better and gain confidence in my storytelling, my ability to tell more complex stories, my own just kind of emotional core of having confidence when I write that, like, I don't know, how do I put this? Like, in the early years of my writing career, it was hard to sort out what voices to listen to when people would critique my work or review my work or edit my work, because I didn't really have that center of like, what was my best work going to look like? I didn't really quite know yet. I had like a vision of what I wanted it to be, but until you really put in the time, it's hard to feel certain about it. It just took work to get there, to the point where I feel confident in it. Now I do, and looking back, it crept in slowly. It wasn't like this one magical moment where I was just like, okay, now I have confidence. I'm not a beginner. I don't feel like I'm in the awkward middle anymore. It's a slow progression. So the only thing you can do is keep working on it. Don't be afraid to put your work out there. Don't be afraid to hit that publish button or send that first query. At some point, you have to do it. You're never going to feel ready. You do want to have put in the real work before you do it, but at some point, you just have to like let it go, see what happens, and know that you can always try again, and you're going to keep getting better. As always, I would love to know any thoughts you've had on this. Where do you feel like you are at in your creative journey, and have you struggled with any of these same things? And if you have published or queried or anything, how did you decide that you were ready? Let me know all your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, as always. If you're new here, welcome. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe. I'm getting so close to 25,000, guys. Please subscribe. If you'd like more from me, my members tier gets 2 bonus videos per month voted on by you guys. I have quite a backlog of videos at this point. You can access my memberships through Patreon, Substack, and YouTube memberships. If you'd like to read any of my books, you can find the link in the description. My Hidden Lands books are always the ones I recommend because I think they're not just good, they're great. And if you feel like you're at that serious turning point in your career, please do check out InkersCon, see if it's right for you. There's a link in the description. Use my code CozyCreative26. Thank you so much for watching. I post every Sunday and sometimes also Wednesdays, and I will see you next time. Bye!